Hi, this is Scott with ClaySys. What we'll be taking a look at today with this video is how to implement a tab control on your ClaySys AppForm. Now, if you've done any work in the past with the InfoPath product, you'll know then that InfoPath does not natively have a tab control. You can mimic the behavior by implementing an HTML layout table and then placing buttons within various cells within that table, and finally duplicating that table on all of your different views that you have in InfoPath. So it will give you the appearance, and looks like it works like a tab control, but it's not an actual tab control. It's much more work involved to get that set up and working the way that you want. With ClaySys, we have an actual tab control as one of the controls you can actually add to your form. So on the screen in front of you now is just the ClaySys AppForms designer where I've created a new form. And if you look on the left under Toolbox, there's a section called Group. If you expand that, you'll notice that there is a control called Tab Control. So if we drag that over to the form, what you get by default looks like a blank empty box. But if you look on the right side under Properties, there is a Tab Collection section. If you click on that to expand it and click the ellipses next to items, you'll then see that you can now have a screen to add various tabs to your tab control. So let's just take a look at that very briefly. So you click Add Tab Item, and let's give our first tab a name of, let's say, Customer Details. And if we click Add Tab Item again, we'll add a second one. And finally, we'll do that one more time to add Order Details while we're here. Okay. Now, once you have the tabs added that you'd like, I went too fast there, let me go back. You can change the order by using these arrows. You can choose whether or not the tab is actually enabled or disabled or visible or not. You can actually add a background color to the tab itself. So I'll change that color, let's say Customer Details. We can just select that value up there, change that to green if you like. You could also pick a color if you prefer. And now if we click OK to that, it does not show up in design view, but if we preview that form, there my tab is now green. So it's very simple to implement a tab control in ClaySys AppForms and be able to customize it the way that you like. Now you may have also noticed that each tab that you add to the tab control comes with its own design grid, just like you have in the ClaySys AppForms designer. So you can right click in that grid and choose to add a row. You can right click and choose to add columns. You can delete rows, just like you can in the actual designer. So this makes it very powerful that you can customize the look and feel of each of your tabs based on the data that you need to display in each of those tabs. But what makes this even better is if you've done any work now with ClaySys AppForms for setting up data sources, then you know that each of these tabs can get data from different data sources. Could be a table from database, it could be a SharePoint list, it could be coming from web services or what have you. But the real benefit is that you can then submit that data or save that data back to all those different locations. You don't have to just send this back to one place. That's what makes this so much powerful in ClaySys. So let's take a look at one that I've actually have designed with more details on this, more plumbing. We'll take a look at how that's designed so that you can see that work. So I'm going to close this form. And I'll switch over to one that I had designed before doing this demo. Now the basic design of this tab control is the same, as you can see. There's a Customer Details tab, an Orders tab, and an Order Details. But I have something different on each one of these tabs. You can see on the Customer Details, I've added a number of controls to show and store the address, city, state, and zip, so forth. On the Orders tab, there's a drop-down box to select the order, but then once you do, there's also an order date field and what the order total is. And then finally, on the Order Details tab, there is a different control called a dynamic grid. And this allows me to show multiple lines of data. So in my case, multiple items that are on each of those orders that we can select from the Orders tab. So now how these get populated initially, let's go through a little bit of that detail. A combo box on a tab is no different than putting a combo box anywhere else in your ClaySys AppForm. You simply go through the data source section over here on the right, you click the ellipses next to items, and then you walk through setting up where this data is coming from. So in my case, this is all coming from SharePoint lists. So we'll just walk through this real quick. This is coming from, since I previously set this up, this is coming from my customers list. And in this case, I don't want any filters on this. I want to show and bring back all of the customers that I have from that list. So I just leave this as it is by default. Now the one thing different here is I'm actually using some foreign key type of columns in my three lists. Let me just stop for a second and show you that. I'm going to flip back over to my SharePoint list here. So my customers list just has the basic information of customer name, address, city, state, and zip, along with the customer ID column you see here. Now on the orders list, you'll see the order information, but I've also added a customer ID foreign key so that I can tie each individual order to a specific customer. And the same holds true on the order details list. Here, I've added an order ID foreign key so that I can tie the individual detail items to a specific order. So now if I change back over to my AppForm Designer, why this is important is in this particular case, for the customer ID, I'm going to show you the display member. In other words, I'm going to show you the customer name. But once a selection is made, what I'm storing is the customer ID, because I'm going to be using that customer ID as the foreign key for my orders tab or my order details. Okay, so let's click next on this. Here I've set up a trigger so that the data in this particular combo box is there when the form loads. I simply chose to add a trigger. I selected form load here, which is already over here, as you can see. Once you select that and click create rule, it creates our rule for us here on the right. So that's set up so that when the form opens, that one combo box gets populated. And then finally, I've set up a sort order that data on customer name. So that is the extent of setting up that combo box. So if I preview this, just to show you, you'll see that I do have my customers in this combo box, but everything else on this form and on all the tabs is blank at the moment. There's nothing in the combo box for orders because that won't get populated until I select a customer that I want to view the orders for. There's nothing in order details as well. All right. So let's go ahead and close that, and let's look at now the orders tab. This particular drop-down box or combo box is set up very similarly to what we just went through with the customers drop-down, but I want to show you a couple of differences with this. So I'm going to expand data source again. Let's walk through this particular with data source wizard. So again, I'm coming from SharePoint. If I go back here, because I want to show you, this one is of course coming from my orders list, but here's one key difference. This one is only going to pull the data where the customer ID foreign key is equal to what I have selected in my combo box from the customer details tab. That way I only get the orders for the customer I've selected. That was the key to this. Now in this case for order ID, I'm going to show you and store the same thing. So in this case I just chose both for order ID. So in other words, it is both the display member and the value member. And the trigger for this one is not until the customer, I've made a selection from the customer drop-down box, obviously. All right. And again, I've set a sort order here on order ID. So let's finish that. Okay. Now, I've got some data sources over here, and I'm going to show you those as well in just a minute. But keep in mind, a data source in your ClaySys AppForm is completely separate than the data sources that we define for combo boxes, right? Those are simply to populate the data in the combo box so that it knows what to show you in that list of items. The data sources here that I set up on the left-hand side are to actually go get the rest of the data, like the address, the city, the state, the order date, that type of thing. We'll walk through that in a second, but I just want to show you how this now works if we preview our form. So once again, the only thing when the form loads that gets executed is filling up this first combo box. So once I select a customer, now the rest of my fields get filled in here on customer details, as well as if I flip over to orders tab, I now have the two orders that ABC Company has placed. And if I select one of those, the order date comes in, the order total, and then finally if I switch over to the order details tab, there are the three line items that make up that $500 order. So as you can see, it's very powerful to be able to have this type of control on your form. It saves you on screen real estate. It makes it cleaner for your users to see. They only see what's absolutely necessary on each individual tab. but you can get and send this data to multiple different locations. Very easy to do. All right, let's close this. And let's now take a look at the plumbing underneath of how the rest of the data gets populated when you make those selections. So our customer's data source here, let me edit that for us. And I'll edit first the select statement here. So what I've done in the select statement or select action is to map all of my fields from my customer details tab to the columns in my SharePoint list. So the TXT customer name is mapped to customer name, TXT address to the address column in SharePoint list, and so forth. Now the same thing though is true here though. When I go get the data for my customer so I can populate the address and city, state, and zip, I want to get that data for the one customer that I've selected from my drop-down box. So this gives us the filter that says, go get me all this data where the customer ID is equal to the selection I've made from my combo box called CBX Select Customer. That way I'm only pulling back the record for that one particular customer. Okay, okay to that. And the same is true for the orders data source. If I select that, you'll notice, if I walk through here, this select statement very quickly, I've mapped the two additional columns here for that particular tab. And once again, I have a filter that says only bring back the orders where the order ID is equal to what I've selected in my combo box called CBX Select Order. Now, I'm going to hold off on showing the third tab data source for just a moment. That's a little bit more involved because we have a dynamic grid here that allows me to show those multiple line items. So let's go ahead and preview this one more time, and we can kind of bring all this together at the moment. So once again, the only thing that initially happens when the form opens is the data source for this one drop-down box or one combo box called CBX Selects Customer. That's the only thing that gets executed to populate that data. Now, once I make a selection, now I go execute over here on the left. You can see this DS Customers. I execute this customer's data source. Remember, it has criteria that says go get the customer data where the customer ID is equal to what I've selected here. So that's how this gets filled in. And then on my Orders tab, the data source for the drop-down box called Orders also gets selected and executed, and it brings back the data just for, in other words, the orders just for the customer I selected here. So now if I drop this down, I have just those two orders. If I come back over here and switch this to the DEF company, you can see this data changes, their details, and now so has the order. So now if I select this, now I populate that data, and then finally, if I show you the Order Details tab, the line items that make up that order are right there as well. And just to show you that that changes, I'll come back over here to Customer Details. Let's choose ABC Company. Let's select the second order. There, the order information changes, and finally the order details. They're the three line items that make up that $500 order. So again, not very difficult to implement, but very powerful in that you can show data from multiple locations and also submit that data back to multiple locations. All right, let's take a look at that final tab here, the Order Details tab. This contains a dynamic grid. And a dynamic grid allows you to show multiple line items of data coming in so that I don't have to keep adding controls and repeating controls. This will do it for me. Now the way that this is set up, if I click this control, once again over here on the right under Properties, it has a Columns property. So if I click that ellipses, this now allows me to set up and create the columns that you see in that data grid control. So the first thing that we have to do when we start this process is let the control know where is the data coming from. Once again, this is coming from a SharePoint list, so I've chosen SharePoint. Now here you can see I've already defined my columns, but the way that you do that with a data grid is simply give the column a name. Let's call it New Column, say. Choose the type of control it is. Is it a text box, a label? You can see the various different controls here. I've been choosing text box for this particular demo. What header do you want to see? In other words, what column header should that be for you? Let's just say New Column. And then finally, you can specify a width, whether or not that column actually shows in the grid control, and whether or not you want that data to be sortable. In other words, by clicking on the column name, can you assort it ascending, descending, so on and so forth. And then once you click the plus sign over here, it just adds it to the lines of columns that will be showing in that particular dynamic grid control. It's that simple to add those. All right, so let's go ahead and click next. I'm not going to add that column because I don't need it, so let's click next. Now finally, here is the select command that actually populates that grid control. So we've set up the columns. We initially told it the data is going to be coming from SharePoint. Here are the columns that I want to show in this grid control. Now, how do I get that data from the list into those columns? So we have a select statement, and we'll click Edit on this. And here I've simply mapped the columns from my grid control to the columns in my order details list. So the product name column from the list is mapped to my column called DG, short for data grid, DG product name. Quantity is mapped to DG quantity, and so on. As you can see, all 5 are mapped there. Once again, I want this to be filtered to only show those items that are on a specific order that I've selected. So we're going to use this filtering over here, this criteria, to say, bring me back all of the order details, all the line items, where the order ID foreign key is equal to what I have selected in my combo box called CBX Select Order on my Orders tab. So let's just take a quick look at the order details list again. So here's my list. So when that data source executes, we're going to come here and grab all the line items where this foreign key, this order ID foreign key, is equal to what I've selected from that orders combo box. That's how that gets populated. All right, so let's click OK to that. And once again, the trigger for this is not going to be when the form opens, but it's going to be once I've made a selection from that orders combo box. That is the trigger. All right. Now, as I've been mentioning throughout this demo, is that the tab control is very powerful, but what makes it even better is the ability to submit data back to multiple lists. Well, I've set up a couple of those updates here. If I go back to Customers and choose Edit, you'll notice that I've configured an update command as well. And I've done the same thing here on the orders. And if I choose Edit, there's my update on orders as well. I didn't go through all of these. I just wanted to show you how this works. But let me go through this edit here. And again, I've just mapped those fields again to what's in the list. Same type of criteria. That's all this is, nothing different. And that's done for both the customer's name information, in other words, the details, as well as the orders. So if we preview this, let's go ahead again and pick ABC Company. And you'll notice here the zip code is coming up as 90211. Let me switch over just to show you here to my list and go back to Customers. And you'll see that ABC Company does indeed show 90211. So I'm going to change that to 90210. And let's go over here to Orders. Let's pick an order. Let's pick the first one here. And it's $100. So let's make that 120, say. We'll change that. Okay. So now let's remember we changed two things here. We changed the zip code, and on order 12345 we changed it to 120. So let's save that. And that's done. Let's switch over to our SharePoint list. Refresh this customer page, and you can see that the zip code was indeed changed to 90210. And if I switch over to orders, you will see that the order total is now $120. So very powerful functionality to be able to implement a tab control in your ClaySys AppForm. You have the ability to pull in data from multiple different data stores to those different tabs that you have, and you also have the ability to send that data back to multiple lists. I hope you found this video to be beneficial. We are going to be producing more of these how-to type videos in the coming weeks and months, so be sure to check our website often for new demonstrations. You can find all of our videos at http://www.clayssys.com/pages/viewdemo.aspx. If there is a video you would like to see that is currently not on our site, please let us know by sending an email to info@clayssys.com, and we will do our best to get one created for you. Again, I hope you found this video to be of benefit, and thank you for using ClaySys AppForms.